Kingdom of Men, Chapter 12, Great Warrior. Once they were out of earshot of the dungeon, Hillip stopped and faced KaLeah. To her surprise, he reached out, gently cupped her face in his hands, and looked deeply into her eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked intently, brows furrowed. His empathetic touch and question brought tears to her eyes. She was so surprised by her own emotional response that she couldn't speak. He suddenly wrapped his arms around her, pulling her to his chest. She let loose a few tears and coughed as something trickled down the back of her throat. His arms around her were strange but welcome and comforting. She hadn't even realized how shaken she was and how she just needed someone to hold her steady for a moment. KaLeah heard a shout from somewhere ahead and quickly came back to her senses. She pushed back gently from Hillip and furiously wiped at her tears as if they had betrayed her. She wanted to feel the anger, not the sadness. "He isn't my father," she said, needing to say that information out loud, to put it out in front of her, to face it as a reality. Captain Davin looked puzzled. "But I thought you said he was the father you were having us search for. He said he's Clegg Trapper from Arion." "He is the same man. He is the one I asked you to find, but he isn't my real father, and I had no idea. He just now told me my real father—" She stopped herself. What in dragon spirits did Clegg just tell her in the dungeon? He and her mother were on Denlarak, the dead planet, but it's alive, and ruled by her actual father? She looked up at Hillip, still peering down at her with deep concern and confusion. "What is it, KaLeah?" "No, it sounds crazy." "KaLeah, Prince Bilex is dead, killed by a weapon none of us have ever seen before. It exploded at him without destroying itself. If you know something, you need to tell me." There was a sudden air of authority to the last statement, like he was talking to a soldier. She straightened up automatically. It was an order, after all, she figured. "He told me the weapon came from Denlarak," she started. "He and my mother came from Denlarak, across the stars and skies, in a flying ship. He said the ruler there is my actual father, and he wants to invade Naldash, enslave the people, and drain it of its resources." Captain David made no sound, no movement or facial expression to give away his thoughts, but he was clearly thinking, assessing the words, and KaLeah, standing there covered in cold sweat and streaks of dried tears. She mirrored his stoicism and stood silently with him in the hallway for moments that dragged on. "We have to tell Princess Amira and counsel together with the other captain that stayed behind. We cannot send this message to the king. We have riders sent to notify him of Bilex's death, but that is all for now. We must tread carefully with this information, or we may both end up back in that dungeon. Do you understand, KaLeah?" She did, and nodded. He clearly did not think she was crazy or that the information was incorrect. He was more concerned about others not believing the story. "You believe it?" she asked, lowering her voice as if this would be a secret between them. "There is no immediate reason not to, and in my position, I never take anything at face value, but I also never take new information lightly. You should never dismiss information as completely true or false because the truth always lies somewhere between the two." A warmth started to spread from her heart and throughout her body. She found herself looking at Hillip in a whole new light. She trusted him and had a newfound faith in him, not just as a captain, but as a person and a leader. She heard a faint humming in the back of her mind. The dragon spirits, she realized. What her father, no, what Clegg had said to her came back in a flash. Dragon spirits were calling to her in order to finish their ancient war. Her eyes widened as she connected the strange sounds she had been hearing to warnings of impending danger. "What is it? Are you all right?" Hillip asked, hands on both of her arms. She didn't want to tell him. She wasn't ready to believe it herself. She had seen the dragon in the woods so long ago that it was easy to dismiss it all as a dream. KaLeah wasn't ready to believe that something completely outside of her control, something no one could possibly believe, was speaking to her. "There is something else, isn't there?" Hillip asked. Dragon's blood, he's really good at this, she thought. She took a deep breath. "It's even crazier than Denlarak," she said. "I can handle whatever it is, KaLeah." She laughed nervously at that, but assumed it to be true. She didn't want to be alone with this information. She wanted some guidance and especially understanding. "Sometimes I see and hear dragon spirits. They come to me to warn me or in times of stress. I hear a low growling sound and what sounds like whispers in the back of my head. I can't turn it off and didn't know what it was, but Clegg just told me about a prophecy. The dragon spirits will call to a great warrior to finish their war," Captain Davin finished. "You know about this prophecy?" "All soldiers do," he said. "Growing up, all young boys fantasize about being the great dragon warrior. We join in the service to the king, hoping that it will be us someday. Men may not discuss it, but in their hearts, they're all trying to be that great warrior and hoping to hear the dragons calling to them." KaLeah was shocked. All this time, a myth existed, something that every little boy grew up knowing, but she had never heard about it simply because she was a girl. She was never meant to fight. She was never supposed to be a warrior. They didn't tell girls stories to encourage them to work harder, be stronger, learn to fight and defend so that someday they could grow up to be a great warrior. The only reason she had learned a different way of being a girl was that the man who raised her happened to be from a completely different planet. "Maybe Denlarak would be a better place for me," she mused to herself. "Maybe women are allowed to be whatever they want there." "Well, it isn't a man, it's me. I am the one they call to, and it's annoying." KaLeah pushed past Hillip in a huff, angry at all men and the silly traditions of Naldash as she stormed off toward the throne room. "All boys grow up knowing this, KaLeah," she mumbled to herself as she walked. She could hear the footfalls of the captain behind her. "Men hope to be the next great warrior someday, KaLeah." Ridiculous. This is all so ridiculous. She went up a narrow staircase into a main hall and stopped dead in front of a tapestry. She walked closer to look at the person riding the translucent winged dragon. "It is a woman," she said. "What is a woman?" Hillip asked, coming up behind her. "Look here," she said, pointing at the tapestry. "I thought it was a man with long hair, but look at the breastplate. The warrior on the dragon's back is a woman warrior." A smile curled along Hillip's face. "You think it's funny?" "It is fascinating. An entire culture blinded." Then he spun to face her, intimately close, but she found herself more comfortable now in his presence. "Do you know what they're telling you?" he asked. "Sometimes they say fight or kill," KaLeah said, crinkling up her nose. "They help me know when danger is near, I think." "Fascinating," he repeated. "Listen, this is a lot of information at once," he continued. "I think it would be in our best interest not to bring too many others into this until we, you and I, fully understand what's going on. Let's go to the princess now and tell her about the potential threat that Denlarak poses. But let's keep the fact that you're hearing dragon spirits to ourselves. I am concerned it might create more danger for you. Some men may be jealous and think that by destroying you, they can prove that you are not the great chosen warrior. His expression was serious, and his hands had moved again to cover her arms. She trusted him completely and could sense the truth in his words. She had known men to fight over women, gold, egos, and just to win. Chills climbed up her spine and raised the hairs on the back of her neck. Agreed, she said in a whisper. Good. Let's go see the princess. I'm afraid that she is scared to death with everything going on right now. All right, she said, quickly composing herself. They walked side by side through the corridors to the throne room. KaLeah was fearful walking into the room. She had been kissed and then rejected by Nicolot at the further end of the ballroom. Prince Bilex had been killed here, and her father had been drugged to the dungeons from this room. Princess Amira looked like a tiny doll sitting on the enormous throne at the end of the room. Her frail body only took up a third of the chair as she leaned her arm on one of the dragon-carved wooden rests. Her shimmery blonde hair hung loose around her head. She saw KaLeah approaching and screeched, very unladylike, in relief. She jumped down from the throne, lifted the edges of her long silver dress, and ran to KaLeah. Thank the spirits! Are you all right? She asked, throwing her arms around KaLeah. My brother is dead. They brought me here to sit on the throne and rule the kingdom until my father can return. Her eyes were filled with tears, some streaming down her cheeks. What should I do? She whispered. KaLeah took account of the room. Aside from Hilip, there were only a few other soldiers clustered near the throne. There were no royal family members left, but some men from favor families, some of which she recognized from previous gatherings, were beginning to appear at the entrance of the throne room. They looked as if they wanted to make inquiries, but they didn't know who to ask. The men lingered and nervously chatted among themselves. Hilip came to stand even closer to the two girls. KaLeah stood up a little straighter. First, you must look as if you are the most confident person on the planet. Do not let on that you are afraid or unsure right now. KaLeah leaned in close and wiped away the princess's tears with the sleeves of her own tunic. This must appear to be in accordance with the king's plans. You will stand up straight, walk with your nose up, look the captains and favors in the eyes when they ask you questions, and sit up straight and proud on that throne. This is your father's land, but it's also your land. Your father is on his way, and you do not need to make any decisions or answer any questions if you do not want to. If anyone asks how your brother died, even though rumors are spreading, you must, for the sake of KaLeah's father's life, refer to the prince's death as an accident, Hilip said in a very low voice. Your father, that's right. I can't believe he is finally here, Amira said. Had he been searching for you too? Not quite. Some bad men kidnapped him. Extellans? No. Bandits? No, Amira, they were from Denlarak. Amira paused and then started laughing. KaLeah, is something wrong with him? Denlarak is the dead planet. No one can be from Denlarak. Shh, please. KaLeah looked at the soldiers and men, making sure they were all keeping their distance. My father is from Denlarak, KaLeah said, slowly, seriously. The word father now sounded strange on her lips, as if it were a lie, but she didn't feel like this was the time to discuss her entire situation. Clegg Trapper's life may be more likely to be spared if he were thought to be the father of a favor. Apparently, people have been living on that planet just as they live here, but they are advanced enough to actually travel here through space. Clegg, my father, flew here with my mother on a spaceship through the sky and landed here. Men from Denlarak came to scout out our planet, found and captured him. Amira, they want to invade our planet. The smile slowly left Amira's lips, and she furrowed her brow. She turned, and slowly walked toward the room entrance. She walked past the men, who all stopped talking and bowed to her. KaLeah and Hilip followed her, passing silent glances between each other as they walked. Amira walked outside, out into the courtyard, and stopped, staring up at the large orb that she and every child on Naldash had grown up beneath. KaLeah walked up beside her. The sun lit the face of Denlarak in the sky, making it the same color as Amira's silver blonde hair. "I always wondered," she whispered to no one, then louder. "Who will believe us?" "I assume that no one will believe us," KaLeah said. "But there is a kingdom up there. They have scouts on this planet right now who have somehow created discord among the kingdoms in order to make us vulnerable." "Lysodania," Hilip said from behind the girls. He stepped forward, and KaLeah followed his line of sight out past the open fields beyond the edge of the kingdom. At least 100 men were approaching, the blue, green, and white Lysodanian colors flying just barely above the horizon. "Bilex has not even been dead a full day. How could they have received word so fast?" Hilip said, more to himself than to the girls. "What do you mean, Captain?" Amira asked. "Weakness, princess. They're here because our king is gone, our prince is dead, and they know we are weak. With your orders, I will bring the foot and field soldiers that remain to stand guard at the castle. We do not have enough time or resources to protect the entire center. I will have my men send word to the villagers to protect their abodes or come to the castle for our protection." Amira's eyes widened with anxiety. She recovered quickly and narrowed her eyes, then raised her chin. "How do I give the orders?" Hilip smiled slightly. "You just did. Excuse me, ladies." He gave a slight bow and then took off in a run back into the throne room to alert the soldiers. KaLeah overheard him tell the men at the entrance to gather all the field soldiers they could and bring their families to the castle. Then all the men scurried away, no longer concerned with the princess and her bodyguard. "Come, my lady, let's get back into the safety of the castle," KaLeah said, reaching out for the young girl caught up in a strange and frightening predicament. "Yes, we must return to the throne room," she said, taking KaLeah's arm in hers. "I must sit on the throne and look as if there is nothing the matter, right?" "I believe so, princess. I am no expert at these things, at royalty, but when a threat approaches, you do not run away in fear. You stand your ground. You greet the threat on your lands and on your terms." She nodded her head, her blonde hair flowing, as they walked back into the castle throne room. "I see the truth of it," she said softly. KaLeah escorted her up onto the dais and waited until she was seated on the gigantic throne before going up to stand beside her to wait for the Lysodanian men. While they waited, her mind started to wander. If the people on Denlarak had many more weapons and were intent on invading, what would the people of Naldash do? Would Belarone soldiers be able to fight off these flying explosions or whatever had come from that gun that killed Bilex so quickly and easily? She had only seen the ones in her cellar and the one in the throne room, but she saw no way of defending against them with swords. When the king returned, there would be no way of explaining the situation to him. He would surely accuse her father, Clegg, of intentionally killing his eldest son and heir. KaLeah's skin was suddenly covered with bumps and her stomach was queasy. She realized in that moment both her and Clegg's lives were in danger. Everyone had seen the weapon, nobody knew what it was, and a member of the royal family was dead. Someone would have to pay. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "I have to get him out of here," she said to herself. Opening her eyes, she set her resolve. KaLeah would break her father out while the soldiers were preoccupied with the Lysodanian visitors. She would see Amira safely to bed, then use the secret passageways to free Clegg. They would head off into the woods and back to Irion. With their limited resources, the war, Lysodania, and the mysterious threat from Denlarak, She hoped that no one would come after them. Her and Clegg would gather what they needed in Arion and head off deeper into the protection of the woods and the mountains. The princess sighed beside her, and she got a small knot in her chest. She did not feel good about leaving Amira behind, but she also didn't want to stay and risk her and Clegg's lives. The young girl was beginning to feel like a little sister and friend, and KaLeah knew how leaving would upset her. She knew the princess would beg her to stay, or worse, sound the alarm for Hilip to prevent her from leaving. Captain Davin, she thought to herself, and a new warmth filled her body. He was kind to her and good, and she would miss him. That thought surprised her, as did the small smile that formed involuntarily at the thought of him. Before she knew it, he was marching back into the throne room with a guard at his back. Princess Amira, favor KaLeah, Hilip said, bowing slightly to them. We believe that the Lysodanian camp is only the first of many. They must have started coming into our lands after the bulk of the army left for Exteli with the king. With our limited remaining resources, they were able to evade our scouts. What are they doing here? Amira asked. News of your brother's death has spread quickly, Your Highness. I believe they have come under the guise of sympathy in order to trick you or manipulate you in some way, since your father and brothers are not here. Amira sat up a little straighter. Do you think they can trick me? She asked. Your Highness, you have never faced this situation before, he said, looking her in the eye. Many leaders face new situations every single day with no prior experience on the matter, no advice, no guidance or direction. Many follow their instincts and listen to more than is spoken. Sometimes good decisions are made and sometimes bad ones. The man is still a leader. But I'm no man, she said, not with disappointment, but with the blunt honesty of a child. No, princess, he said. But you are more important than any of the men who will come before you today. You are the most important leader in all of Belarone Kingdom today. And because you are our leader, I believe that you know how to keep from being tricked. KaLeah's heart fluttered at his words. She wondered who this man was, truly. Neither KaLeah nor Amira had to do anything to earn this man's respect and trust. He bestowed it upon them, and she was beginning to feel as if he had been her friend all along, and not just a captain ordered to keep her from running off. Hilip took a deep bow, rose, and motioned to the doorway. On the princess's command, the Lysodanian messengers may enter. Princess Amira waved her hand. Your Highness, Hilip said loudly, may I present General Atcher, Captain Kenhari, Captain Wiccan, and Captain Vig of the Lysodanian Kingdom. General Atcher entered the room first, followed by three other men. They all wore similar uniforms, only just visible under their layers of breast, thigh, shoulder, and arm shields. They walked loudly, unable to quiet the clanking armor. General Atcher had long, untamed blonde hair streaming well past his shoulders. His face was chiseled perfection, with a scar running along the left side of his jaw, only seeming to add to his appeal. Two of the captains were dark-skinned with dark hair, and the last had lighter skin with thin, light brown hair. They all had lines on their faces from wearing their helmets for a substantial amount of time. General Atcher approached the throne. His men stopped about halfway between the door and the throne, but he kept walking until he was directly in front of the raised dais. He looked at the princess and KaLeah over, from head to toe, assessing his foe, KaLeah assumed. He smiled and bowed. Lovely Princess Amira, what an honor it is to stand before you, he said. His voice was gravelly but authoritative. I am General Atcher of His Majesty Macroth's Royal Army. You are welcome here, General, said the princess. Most gracious, Your Highness. We are deeply troubled to hear of your brother's violent death. We hope that the murderer has already been punished, and we sympathize with the grief you must be feeling. And here, alone, with no other brother and no father to care for you in this time of mourning, I would like to offer my condolences and the services of me and my men should you require it. I am quite fine with my own soldiers, thank you, she said. KaLeah grinned, pleased with her dismissive response. But thank you for your condolences. Why else are you here? KaLeah could tell that the princess had asked the question out of sheer curiosity, not to be rude, and she was very curious herself. She doubted very much that they would receive an honest response. I understand that you are in great emotional pain. The loss of the royal heir to the throne is indeed tragic. Yours is a long and glorious legacy of honorable men and strong kings. It is a shame to see it end. It hasn't ended, Amira said. My father and brother Nicola are still alive and fighting in Exteli. Of course, princess, the general said. However, Exteli is resisting, and your father is beyond his warring years. It is doubtful that either of them will survive. Many of your men have been lost already, and the kingdoms are suffering. King Mikroth Lysodania believes that now is the time to step in and help facilitate peace between all the kingdoms of Naldash. I'm here to arrange that peace, dear princess. KaLeah could feel the tension rise in the room like an electrical charge. Her hand went to her sword as if preparing for an attack, although she knew this would not be a physical assault. Not yet. A rumbling began in the back of her head, and she knew it for what it was now. She could picture the green scaled and translucent winged creature in her mind from that day in the woods. It was there, warning her. Something was coming. Peace is a wonderful thing, General, Amira said. She sat up straighter and closer to the edge of the throne. My brother and father are alive. Some of my army is here and some are in Exteli. Once we defeat Exteli, most will return. I am glad that you want peace, General, because right now there is ample peace between us, and I would hate to think you want to change that. Of course not, sweet princess, he said, bowing again, possibly to buy himself time. However, if some tragedies were to befall your father and brother, we are here and ready to assist you. We would ensure your safety at all costs and will step in to ensure that Exteli will not take Belarone. King Macroth will take it under his control, smoothly and with no bloodshed. You would have our protection in his name. You'll take my kingdom under his control? She asked pointedly. The general smiled, not unkindly, but with the confidence of a man who feels he has already won a battle. It would be your best and safest option, my dear. If we do not take control, then King Sarzo Exteli will. Under his rule, you may not fare as well. King Macroth will protect you, as if you were one of his own daughters. KaLeah suddenly remembered that Macroth had daughters and no sons. The kingdoms may have been unified by marriage eventually, but not if both princes perished. Macroth was trying to play various angles to ensure his eventual control of Belarone Kingdom. How kind of him, Amira said. I must consult with my captain. Since our kingdoms are allies and you are only here to ensure my protection, I will not force you to leave our lands. You may go. The general smiled even wider and then bowed a final time. As he and his men left the throne room, KaLeah smirked to herself, realizing how frustrated the general must be not having the child princess immediately hand over her father's kingdom. He probably expected an easy victory, but his sly smile had hidden his disappointment. You did very well, Princess Amira, KaLeah said. The princess sighed heavily and slumped back into the throne chair the moment all the men had left the room. You bought us time to figure out what to do. KaLeah wanted the girl to feel some victory in this dire situation. He wants to take the kingdom from us, right? Amira asked. Yes, he does, KaLeah responded. They are out there waiting for an opportunity to strike. He wanted you to know that if you surrender, nobody else will die. KaLeah thought of Captain Davin and the others fighting the Lycidanian army on the castle grounds while KaLeah kept Amira safe and hidden inside. She hoped that it wouldn't come to that. She asked the dragon spirits to keep King Belarone and Nicolot alive. I'm hungry. Can we go to dinner now? She asked in a tiny voice. KaLeah smiled. Yes, let's go to the dining hall. You have fought enough battles for one day. After dinner, Hilip escorted KaLeah and Amira back to their rooms. They had no more news from their own men, and the Lycidanians had returned to their camp without issue. The captain was more quiet than usual, and she could tell that he was putting plans and contingencies in place for many eventual scenarios. Though the number of Lycidanians in Belarone was far less than the number of Belarone soldiers, it would not take much for McRoth to send his full army. Would Princess Amira hold Lycidania off, or would she surrender? KaLeah wasn't sure she could give the princess advice, even if she asked for it. She would give up the kingdom in a moment, just for the chance at freedom. This isn't my fight or my decision, she told herself. Her next mission was to get herself and Clegg out of Belarone and back to Arion. Once Princess Amira was safely tucked into bed with guards on her door, KaLeah slipped through the passageways to get supplies from the kitchens. She had her sword and had snatched an extra one from the armory for her father. Clegg, she reminded herself. She was torn between her desire for Clegg to approve of her and love her as a father, and the knowledge that he had never actually been her father. It was too much to consider now, she thought. At the very least, she owed him his life for raising a child that wasn't his. He trained her to fight in a culture where women were only supposed to be wives and mothers. He had never pressured her to just find a nice boy to settle down with. For all that, she knew that she owed him. She hoped, with the resources limited and the threat from Lycidania, the bulk of the soldiers and guards would be spread about the exterior of the castle, focused on keeping enemies from coming into the castle. She hoped they would be less concerned with people leaving. She reached the dungeon, and as she had expected, there were no guards in sight. She found Clegg sitting on the ground, leaning against the stone wall of his cell. Are you ready to leave? She asked, grabbing the key from the spot where it hung on the wall. Glad to see you, Clegg said, standing up. Everyone seems to have left for more pressing matters. Are we clear from here to the forest, or will we need to make a plan of escape? KaLeah unlocked the cell. I have a plan. Put this on. It's a Belarone soldier's uniform. Lycidania is on the verge of attacking the kingdom, so everyone will be preoccupied with that threat, giving us a chance to escape. Clegg put the uniform on quickly, and then they marched through the hallways, up various sets of stairs, and toward a side entrance. Look straight ahead and don't say a word, she ordered. It felt strange, ordering around this man who raised her. Who is he? She wondered. He had kept so much from her, and now that she knew he wasn't her real father, everything made more sense. He had never been warm, never supportive. He did not hug her, compliment her on anything except for successfully completing a task, and never told her he loved her. She always dismissed it as just the way he was. He was stoic, strong, silent, proud, and had lost the woman he admired. But he had not really loved her mother. If anything, he must have been angry at having to raise her child after she passed. It was true that he had raised her, and she was grateful to him. But what did she realistically owe him in return? She wanted him to be proud of her, but she didn't know any more if she actually loved him. She had felt left behind, abandoned, and had tried to find him because he was all she knew. He trained her to survive and to think for herself. Was he paramount to her survival now? The independence he helped build within her told her she no longer needed him to survive. He completed his duty in raising her. She thought about what going back to Arion and then up to the mountains to hide with him would look like. They would hunt and cook as they always had, but neither one of them needed the other now. Her life had completely changed, and after she saved his life tonight, they owed each other nothing. "Halt! Who goes there?" asked the guard at one of the side exits. "Favor KaLeah," she responded with strength and pride at the words. "Captain Davin has sent me and the soldier to the stables on a secret mission for the princess." The guard narrowed his eyes, looking her and Clegg over. He kept his face concealed in the shadows. "You may pass," said the guard, casting his eyes back out to watch the grounds. She moved confidently past him and walked with Clegg behind her with a steady pace toward the stables. Once in the stables, she went to a stall to ready a black dragget for Clegg. Once ready, she moved to the stall with Maze. The tall, golden brown dragget excitedly kicked the ground and nodded in recognition of KaLeah. "Hey, girl," she said gently. "We used to have dragons like these on Denlarak, but they went extinct. It is amazing to see one in person." Clegg ran his hand down the long, scaly neck of the dragget that would carry him back to Arion. Back to Arion, KaLeah said to herself, feeling a sense of relief. So much had changed. The princess depended on her, although it made her a servant with no life of her own. What kind of a life would she have hiding in the mountains? What if Denlarak really does invade Naldash? What if Lysidania attacks tomorrow and takes the throne? The low growls and whispers started again in the back of her mind. She felt a heavy weight on her, as if something was pushing her feet into the ground. Maze shook her head back and forth fiercely and backed away. "What's going on?" Clegg asked. "The dragon spirits want me to stay." KaLeah could feel the truth of it, even before she heard the words pushed into her mind. Stay. Fight. Clegg Trapper nodded, then mounted his dragget. "You have a higher calling, KaLeah," he said. "My calling, my work, is done. There is more for you to do here." "But there is still so much I don't know about Denlarak, about my mother, and about the dragon spirits." KaLeah shook her head and clenched her fists in frustration. "There is no time now, but you are the one they chose. They will not let you fail. Farewell." She watched him turn and drive his dragget out into the night. She felt as if a hole had opened up in her chest. The one thing she had wanted back was leaving her again, alone. She wanted her life back. She wanted the small, warm hut in the village. She wanted to hunt the woods. She pictured herself sitting quietly, obediently, in front of the fireplace, cleaning a kill, while Clegg sat nearby. There had been so many silent nights, so many opportunities for him to tell her the truth. KaLeah realized that she could have made so many different decisions had she only known the truth. She turned toward Maze, looking the beautiful and powerful beast in the eye. She shook her head. "No," she told the dragget. "I don't want to go back to Arion. I'll never go back."